Okay, today's video is about fly rod setup. Fly rod setup. I was working on a visual aid for the Michigan Trout Unlimited Fly Fishing School, which is held in the second week of June every year, which is a great program. I mean, if you want to really up your fly fishing game, that's the way to go. So anyways, one of the things that we do is we teach all the different kind of knots and how to set up your rod and everything. And we needed a visual aid, so I put one together just to kind of give you an idea about what we're talking about here. So this is a typical fly line. I'm going to kind of bring it in a little bit closer. And there's a number of parts to it. First of all, there's the backing, which is this thin Dacron material, and that's connected to fly line. And fly line is typically in kind of two pieces. Try and get the light right for you. Or it's not in two pieces, but it's in two parts. There's about 100 feet, 90 feet of fly line. About 2/3 of it is what's called the running line, and this is a very thin line. And then it swells to become much thicker. Okay, and this is the actual part that you're casting most of the time, the first 30, 35 feet of the line. And then that runs way over here, okay? And then there's usually some kind of loop at the end, and then through a marriage knot or loop-to-loop knot, it connects to a leader, which starts out thick and then gets to whatever size tippet you want, and I'll get into that in a minute. So it's basically, this is probably the most important part of your fly line. So let's start first of all with the backing. The backing is this Dacron stuff. And usually if you buy a fly rod or fly whatever, fly line or whatever, they'll give you maybe 100 yards of backing. You need, the idea of backing in the old days was because the spools themselves were so small that you didn't want to wrap your fly line around a really, really tiny arbor because it would get all kind of curly and kinky. So the idea was the backing basically just made your arbor much bigger. Now with modern arbors, it's not as critical to get that arbor as big as you need it. I mean, some arbors are that size. But this is an old rod, so it needs to push that arbor out to about that much, and that's what the backing does. Once in a while, this will give you extra length. Maybe if you're really onto a big steelhead, you might get past your fly line. I think the only time I've ever gotten into my backing was with a carp up in Traverse City and some bonefish down in Mexico. So, you're never going to see your backing once you put it on there. And it's not that critical how much you put on there unless you, I don't know, whatever. Okay, so you get a nice nylon or a Dacron backing, it doesn't matter. Sometimes a different color is kind of fun. Makes your reel look really cool. And that's attached, first of all, it's attached to the reel with something called an arbor knot, or sometimes a Duncan loop. And that's just a slip knot, and it'll just, when this line gets pulled, this loop will just tighten down onto the arbor, okay? You don't need tape, you don't need anything. Once you put a few spins on it, it's fine. I once caught a carp, and the backing was so old that it just broke off at the arbor. As soon as the carp got to the point where I wasn't pulling at it anymore, it pulled all my line out, it just stopped because there was no more pull on it anymore. So I just walked over the line and picked it up and pulled the carp in. Okay, so that's an arbor knot, and that's spun up on your reel. And then when you come to the backing attaching to the fly line, you use something called an Albright knot. I'm not sure why you use that knot, but that's the knot, that's the official knot that's used. A nail knot would work fine there too, I imagine. Once you put it on there, you never see it again, so it's one of those kind of knots. So then your running line then goes onto your spool here, onto your reel, and then it continues on until you get to your fly line. I noticed this got cut there, so I got to fix that. And then finally, you get, oh, okay. So finally you get down here to this end, and sometimes your fly line will have a loop welded into it, which seems to work fine. Most of the line I seem to get never has a loop on the end. So I take a piece, the butt piece of an old leader. It's that thickness, 0.027, I think it is, or 23. And I use a nail knot here and make a precision loop here. So it's basically a nail knot, a little bit of this thick leader, and a precision loop. And then on the fly line, there's a loop at the end of the fly line, often a precision loop or something like that. And you use what's called a loop-to-loop connection. And then that goes onto your leader, which starts out thick and gets smaller and smaller. And eventually, sometimes you put some tippet at the very end here, sometimes not. And then you attach it to your hook with a cinch knot, clinch knot, or whatever kind of Davy knot or whatever kind of knot you typically like to use. It's not a big deal. At the school, periodically we will find people that they have put their lines on backwards. So they're trying to cast, they're having a hard time casting, they come to school, oh, I don't know, I don't get it, I can't cast. And then we look at their line, and most lines nowadays are called weight forward lines, and their lines are on backwards. So this part is actually close tied to the backing over here. And so it's flipped. So they're trying to cast this stuff, which is next to impossible to cast. There's not enough weight or stiffness in it. So one of the things that you want to check if you're fairly new to the sport or whatever is to check to make sure that the thick part of your line is near the front and the thin part is near the back. So pull off, about 30 feet or so. You'll find that the beginning part of your line will be thin for maybe 2, 3, 4 feet, and then it'll get thick, and then after about 30 feet it starts getting very thin again. So that's an important thing, and it's surprising how many rods are set up backwards. When you're thinking of the cost of things, your rod is very important. I'd spend some decent money on the rod, and your fly line is important. The reel doesn't do much of anything. It just really just is a place to keep your line. Even this, which is a super cheap old reel, if you catch a big fish, all you got to do is just kind of put your hand on it, and that acts as a drag. So it's not critical. So anyway, so these are just some of the common knots. The arbor knot backing to the reel, then the Albright knot backing to the line, then the nail knot typically either attaches directly to the leader or to an extra little loopy loop thing here, and then finally the clinch knot at the very end. I just thought I'd just do that while I'm kind of hanging out, and just to give you an idea of what are all the pieces. When you go into the fly shop, you want to make sure that you sound like you know something. I think the first year or so that I was fly fishing, it was a mystery to me what the tippet was and what the leader was. And all the tippet is as you cut back your leader from the flies you've been catching, you just add tippet and to rebuild your leader. So that's all I have today. Hope you have a good one. Remember the Michigan Trout Unlimited Fly Fishing School. It's a whole weekend, 9 meals, 2 nights lodging, and a lot of good fun. It's like 10 years of fishing in one weekend. So there you go. I'll see you at the next Ann Arbor TU meeting. Bye.